Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to my channel, Do Ministry Gaming, and in this video, I'll be doing a TLDR of the game balance manifesto that GGG posted for the patch 3.15 Expedition League. So I'll throw in my 2 cents and my personal opinion on how I feel about the game balance manifesto here as we go. But the patch notes are coming out literally around the corner here tomorrow, where we will see the full extent and the numbers behind how GGG wants to implement some of these changes. And so take everything kind of in this video with a bit of a grain of salt until those patch notes come out, which I'll make another video for to talk about in detail some of these changes and really how it's going to impact the game. But in terms of the manifesto here, I will have a link in the description below to where you can find this document if you would like to read it yourself in detail as well. So without further ado, let's get started. So this first section here basically goes over how GGG wants to approach the balance of the game go forward here. And this is something that has already been discussed thoroughly by Chris Wilson, even at the start of 3.14, which was last league. And that is that GGG feels that the character power or the power creep of the game is currently too high. And instead of taking the approach that most other games take, which is continuing to increase monster life and then to balance the increase in the number of the damage that the characters can do, GGG is taking the approach to try to nerf everything so that the existing content becomes more of a challenge again, instead of one-shotting bosses or phasing bosses before they even do any skills. And so this is an approach that GG wants to take, and they have said that they are going to make an iterative approach here and continue to do this, and I expect that they're going to continue to do this all the way up until PoE 2. So really, this is really just the, I guess, second phase of it if you consider 3.14 the first phase. The other thing they really want to do in this manifesto, which is clear, is that they want to slow the game down. And by slowing down, I really mean not only reducing the damage, but also reducing a lot of movement speed capabilities and also reducing a lot of attack speed and really make this game a challenging game again. And like I say, I'm going to expect them to continue to do that all the way up until PoE 2, so that PoE 2 can feel like that fresh new game where you're starting off as a character and you're not immediately just blasting through all the content at lightning speed. So I actually am personally a big fan of where they're going with this, and as well as all the other changes that they're looking to make in this manifesto. I am actually in general a big fan of, and that might not be a popular opinion. I know there's a lot of disappointment out there in terms of having character power reduced as significant as they mention in this post here. But I actually am a big fan, and I'm very excited to see how the meta is going to change, how the game is going to change, and how much more challenging the league can be this league. All right, so the first section that they go over here is support gem reduction. They call it the Great Support Gem Reduction. That should be pretty self-explanatory already. But this section also talks about some active skill gems as well and how they're managing that on top of the support gem nerfs, I guess you can call it. But basically, there's really 2 main things they're trying to accomplish with the support gems. The first is that they feel like the support gems are too powerful now, with as many of them out there with the big damage multipliers. And then one of the issues that causes is that not only is the skill becoming too powerful, but also that there are a lot of other support gems that just don't get used at all because there's so many strong multiplicative ones now. And so they're trying to do those 2 things. And basically what they're saying is, in terms of the damage reduction, they want to reduce a fully 6-link skill power by about 20 to 40% reduction by balancing a lot of these support skill gems that are giving way too much a damage boost. One other thing they're going to do is if the support gem has too high of a damage multiplier and they don't want to just nerf the number, they are also increasing the downsides of using a skill gem that has a very high damage multiplier. So for example, Controlled Destruction support gem now penalizes critical strikes multiplicatively instead of additively or subtractively, however you want think about it. And so I really like that as well, but basically it's going to really reduce the damage of our characters. So down here, you know, they set out some guidelines you can read yourself of if you'd like, the guidelines that they're using internally at GGG to manage these balances. And so you can read these numbers yourself as to how they're pulling some of these in line. And then down here, there's sort of a couple sections here. This one here talks about bow gems. So I guess they're not nerfing the bow support gems like Barrage, GMP, and Chain as much. So I guess if you're a bow character like myself, I really like bow skills, as many of you know. They're kind of buffing bow skills, I guess, by not nerfing them. And similarly down here, they go into talking about traps as well. So same thing, they're not really nerfing the trap support gems as much as some of the other support gems. And then down here, they're kind of talking about how some skills are a lot more reliant on the support gems to become powerful versus other skills. So for example, the example they've shown here is Ground Slam. They felt like Ground Slam was actually really what made it powerful was the support gems versus maybe another skill that actually the active skill itself has in itself a lot of damage as well. And so the way that they're tackling it is by adjusting some of these other skills, for example, this Ground Slam here, to do sort of some more damage from the skill itself while reducing some of the support gems that it's going to use to balance out that damage. So they're probably going to do this for a variety of skills that kind of function in a similar way. And then this next part here talks about Warcry empowered slams, which has been a problem for a few patches now and were extremely powerful, as they've mentioned here. And so this was something that I myself actually and my community in the stream have always kind of been talking about patch after patch after patch. When are they going to nerf the cries, the war cries? And I guess they are doing that here. For example, Seismic Cry no longer provides more damage to exerted attacks. And so they're switching things up that way. All right, so the next point that they try to make here is that they expect the changes for the support gems to impact the 6-link setups and the endgame damage far more than it will for the fewer links. So for example, 3 or 4 link setups. One of the reasons is just the nature of how support gems work. As you stack more, they stack more multiplicatively, right? And so because of these compounding effects, just by simply nerfing the support gems, you're going to nerf the 6-link damage far more than you are going to nerf the 4-link damage, for example. And so I guess this paragraph really here is just to reassure us that the early game isn't probably going to struggle as much, but really the nerfs are coming for the late game. And then the next one here talks about the increased critical strike support, increased critical damage support, and the Nightblade support gems, and that they felt like they weren't used enough or weren't as powerful as the other support gems. So they've actually buffed these skill gems. So it'll actually be quite interesting to see if a lot of these gems will see play again. I do personally feel like they have fallen out of favor quite significantly. For example, crit damage support has fallen out of favor due to so many other more damage multiplier gems. And then the next paragraph here is that they're saying they felt like the awakened support gems are too strong. And they actually make a point here saying that there are some instances where if your build actually uses 5 awakened support gems, your 6-link damage could be as much as 50% more damage compared to regular support gems of those types. In general, I personally do feel like awakened support gems could, take a little bit of a hit as well. Some of them are just absolutely insane and far too strong. And so I'm a big supporter of this one as well. All right, and then the next sort of few paragraphs talks about the mana situation, which was something that I've talked about many times before as well, which is a lot of the mana builds are very strong defensively and offensively, especially, with the Archmage support. I had speculated that Archmage was going to get tuned even last patch, but they kind of left it out of last patch as they had other things to take care of, but looks like it's finally here. And so Archmage is receiving quite an adjustment here. It looks like that Archmage is going to be lowered to 60% of mana cost from 108% of mana cost at level 20, which is this line here. Supported skill gems gain added lightning damage equals 60% mana cost versus what it used to be 108. And so this was a lot of damage if you were a mana build and you stacked a lot of mana. So this was really quite strong for a lot of builds. And a lot of the mana builds are very extremely tanky as well. And so it kind of was the best of both worlds. And so I do agree with this, and I'm not shocked by it or surprised to see it. And then also, it sets your spells mana cost to be 5% of your maximum unreserved mana instead of 6%. So another adjustment to sort of reduce the amount of added lightning damage that you're going to get. All right, so next is quality bonuses. They felt like were inappropriate for some gems. So they give an example here: greater multiple projectiles now gives proj damage instead of attack speed. The chain now gives chaining range instead of projectile speed. Whereas you can actually still get proj speed on an anomalous quality, but so it's slightly harder to get. But chaining range, okay, that's kind of neat. And quite unique to a chain support gem, right? Versus something that's just like proj speed. So cool changes. Interested to see how that works. All right, so the next section is the Flask rework section here. This has been talked about a lot already. I'm sure you've heard of it at least. In the 3.15 announcement trailer, talked about it. Lots of streamers have already talked about it. I was actually away for the weekend here, so I wasn't able to put any videos out talking about it. Long story short, they are nerfing flasks to oblivion because they're way too strong. Flask charges in terms of how you gain them and how often you can use them is really getting nerfed. The power of the flasks themselves are getting nerfed across the board in general for a lot of the flasks. And then unique flasks are also getting nerfed. Getting heavily reworked. A lot of them were really powerful. They've also added some, currency items that you can use on flasks to make them interact differently. But anyway, assuming you're familiar with this already, and a lot of this italics text was already what was discussed in the announcement video. Basically, what the first part that is new here for the Balance Manifesto is that a lot of the base flasks have been reworked. In particular, they felt like Diamond Flask was way too strong, and I agree. Your crit strikes are lucky. It was the single-handedly the biggest boost you can get to your crit chance out of anything in the game, out of one source. And so, when you put it in that context, I think a nerf to that flask really does make sense. It was used on a lot of builds. And made it very convenient for you to not have to focus or invest too much into crit chance. Crit strikes are lucky is now getting changed to 100% increased crit chance, which is additive, as you all know by now. And so it really brings down the power of that particular flask in line with the crit as well. They've also nerfed the sulfur flask as well, in the sense that enemies on consecrated ground no longer have additional base chance to be critically hit. There were some flasks, though, that they felt were underutilized, which was, I guess the normal version of these. And so, seeing some buffs on these flasks is probably a good thing. I don't know if the changes necessarily will make people use them more. What they're doing is they're increasing the base duration and making the flask consume less charges. And hopefully they will make these used a little bit more. Now, the next section here, I mentioned already, unique flasks have all been reviewed and many have been rebalanced or reworked. They don't talk about Bottle Faith here, but without a doubt that will be nerfed quite significantly. I'm certain of it. But, they are talking about some other flasks here. Some of the specific ones they are citing here, which was a surprise to me, is Dying Sun. I thought they would actually nerf the number of projectiles to maybe 1 and reduce the area of effect, because the Dying Sun flask was really quite strong. But it sounds like, at least from the manifesto here, they're maintaining the area of effect and the additional projectiles, but only making it consume more flask charges and reducing the duration. And so I was, a little surprised by that. They even say here with the new Enkindling Orb, which gives Flask effect, you can now get 3 additional projectiles from Dying Sun, and then with some increased Flask effect elsewhere, you can get up to 4 relatively easily. So That actually is quite surprising to me. I really thought they were going to heavily nerf Dying Sun, but it sounds like they're really just nerfing the flash charges and duration, and even potentially giving you an ability to get more projectiles even easier than before. So that was an interesting change to me. But anyway, they go on to talk about Curse Gain Flask here as well, in terms of how the Enkindling Orb, they envision potentially improving some interactions with some of the other flasks. So they give one example here, Curse Gain Flask, which gives 100% increased duration. And with the Enkindling Orb, you can see here, gives 89% increased duration on top of that. So 189% increased duration. You can actually see this flask can last 15, 16 seconds, which actually is kind of nice. They're adding new flask duration clusters. So I'll be interested to see that, because I am still really quite interested personally in playing Pathfinder, as well as the new flask skill. So this is of quite a bit of interest to me. The explosive concoction skill is very interesting to me. So I'll be dabbling in that for sure. So make sure to come hang out on stream and follow me to see how that progresses. But anyway, Flask effect of this nature, and the Flask effect nodes they're saying is going to be mostly around the Ranger area, which lines up with, you know, the Pathfinder ascendancy. So interesting to see what that is. And one thing they didn't mention here yet is how the Pathfinder ascendancy nodes are going to change relative to all this Flask rework. So there's a big unknown here. This is all new territory for all of us. And so we'll see, I think, in the patch notes tomorrow, just how they're going to try to balance some of those ascendancy, you know, impacts to these Flask changes, I imagine. And then down here, they talk about enduring mana flask. They're going to no longer penalize duration, but so you have to use it less, but also provides less mana than before. Then they talk about adrenaline modifier on flask, giving too much movement speed before, so they've nerfed that quite a bit, like say in line with slowing the game down quite a bit. So they're actually nerfing adrenaline from 20 to 30% down to 6 to 8%. I thought that was okay too. Not too caught up about that change there. Iron Skin and Reflexes suffixes has been reduced, granting 46% increased armor, down from 60 to 100%. All right, the next section is all about player ailment mitigation. So elemental ailments. Basically, they felt like it was way too easy to achieve 100% elemental ailment mitigation, or just in general ailment mitigation. For example, before you could run any class and just run flasks and basically, you know, get 100% ailment mitigation. So they've removed that from the flasks now, and the ability for flasks to do that. Now they also have to balance the rest of it to make it harder to get. They don't want certain ascendancy classes to just be able to get it with one, you know, passive skill point and just be immune to everything, which I agree with. As nice as it was to have on a lot of the classes that I played, like Raider and Pathfinder, I do think that was a little easy to get. Based on the changes they're talking about, I actually am, again, very quite supportive of it. It's going to make the game harder, but I think that is, you know, that's the point, and I actually would like to see the game harder myself. And so a good example here, I won't go over everything, but a good example here is they're saying that the Raider, which used to have 100% ailment immunity with the one passive node, now gets a 50% chance to avoid elemental ailments. So you actually need to get the other 50% elsewhere, and that's actually a very doable thing. So they didn't gut it outright, which I love. You know, they still gave 50% for Raider, which is quite a bit. And then you just have to invest a tiny little bit, you know, to supplement that. There's some really great elemental ailment avoidance nodes around the Ranger tree, for example, that I'm familiar with. Of course, I play a lot of Ranger. You know, topping this up for a Raider, if I want to play it again, it's going to take a bit of investment, but it won't be, you know, break the bank investment. So I really quite like this change. You know, they've talked about some other classes, maybe like Inquisitor and Elementalist, not getting it at all anymore, which I kind of actually also agree with. Elementalist was really quite strong already. It really doesn't need it. I mean, requiring the Elementalist to invest heavily to get it, if if they want it, I think is fair, just because Elementalist is quite strong. Inquisitor, I don't play a lot, but I understand is quite strong as well. And so, they're doing it differently to different classes. They say Hierophant and Pathfinder will retain some level of ailment mitigation as well. Now, the next part here is to talk about bleed and corrupted blood and curses. They felt like, flasks before really mitigated too easily, which I agree. The flask of warding, I always had one on every single character I ever played because it was a one suffix on a flask that enabled me to basically completely bypass curses, right? They're changing that, because they're removing that from, or nerfing flasks in general. They're needing to add some support to the passive tree to mitigate some of these other things as well. They've also made some changes to the Pantheon to be able to mitigate some of this corrupting blood and bleeding and what have you. And so I think that's appropriate if they're going to nerf it right out of the flasks to kind of make it somewhat attainable elsewhere as well. All right, so the next section talks about poison, which I absolutely love. For many patches now, I've said poison needs a bit of a rework or maybe a buff, because I personally felt like poison was in a really weird spot. There are absolutely viable poison builds that are out there and that are quite strong as well. But poison felt like it was really weird. It felt like it was a lot less versatile as an ailment compared to something like Ignite. It's very easy to put an Ignite build together. It's very versatile. You can use it with many skills, many ascendancies. But poison was kind of weird. And I think this second line, summarizes it nicely. Not entirely, but nicely. Poison builds felt like Pigeonhole. They were playing Assassin as well as this particular unique flask, which a lot of the builds were, of course. And so seeing a bit of a rework, I think, is going to be nice. This first line really gets me excited. Now inherently does 50% more damage. I'm really hoping this change alone will enable more different ascendancies to play poison, as well as more different skills to play poison. We'll see how that goes. But I really like that. I think it's really going to improve the variety and the versatility of poison. So with that change, they're also having to nerf some of the assassin, of course. Otherwise, it'd be way too powerful and continue to pigeonhole people into playing assassin. Nerfs were quite significant, but if poisons in general are going to do 50% more damage, that will probably balance out all of these nerfs here already. So I quite like that. And then the next part is just a rework to the particular flask that they felt was used a lot for poison builds. Then here, Pathfinder Master Toxicist node is also getting a bit of a nerf to, balance out for the poison damage increase, which I think is appropriate as well. The other point they're saying here too is poison builds were also had some uninteresting array of support gems. Again, totally agree. They basically reworked some of the poison support gems, long story short. And then they're also saying these poison changes are going to affect the monsters as well. So monsters that are poisoning you are also going to be doing 50% more damage. Which I also agree, because poison as a harmful ailment to you felt underwhelming compared to Ignite, for example. Ignite can kill you really fast, whereas poison never felt like it was really that dangerous. Making that change will make poison feel dangerous again, so I like that. And then, however, they've lowered the poison damage for some bosses that do a lot of poison damage, like the Hunter, for example. All right, so next section is Ailment Thresholds. Basically, what they're saying is because damage is reduced, it's harder to apply ailments. And so the threshold to apply ailments has to be lowered to compensate for the damage reduction. So that basically what this here talks about. And then also what they're saying here is something that people have asked for a lot is that we don't know what ailments are on the monsters that we're fighting. And so now they've added a icon for each ailment that is on the boss here. You can see it on this screenshot. On this boss, there's a shock on there, 11% shock. So this is really, really nice. I am loving this. I think that's really appropriate and really fantastic to have. Trigger effect costs. Anything that is a trigger, like cast on crit, is the one that everyone understands the most. Those spells that get triggered now will also require you to pay its mana cost, and in some cases even more mana cost, to make them sort of more balanced, because it felt like spells being cast on trigger already had a lot of other benefits to it. Like, for example, bypassing cast time, right? Cast speed, you don't need any of that for cast on crit, for example. You know, to have it also require mana is a nerf, but it's something I think you can work around, and it's something they're wanting you to work around and invest in terms of having a little bit more mana to be able to enable the powerful effects of something like cast on crit, which are oftentimes very, very powerful builds. And then one thing in particular, not only are cast on crit triggers requiring mana, but also cast on damage taken. So you can't just slap it into your build now and just always have that go off. You also need to have the mana to pay for it. I think that's actually nice, personally, but it can be frustrating, I think, to implement cast on damage taken now. So it'll be a bit of a shock, a little bit of a change there in terms of just blindly implementing it onto your build. So there'll be just a bit more thought required for that, I think. And then here, Flame Dash, Dash, Smoke Mine. Basically, these movement skills are too strong, and they're nerfing them so that they're not as crazy as movement skills. Arcane Surge, they are adjusting that to provide increased mana regeneration rather than percentage of mana per second. So a bit of a nerf. This next one is big. Fortify Effect. Fortify Effect was absolutely way too strong. Before. Since Fortify has been put into the game, over time, slowly, there's been more and more Fortify Effect added to the game. It's gotten to the point where it's way too much now and way too strong. Absolutely agree. They're nerfing Fortify Effect and caps you out. What they're aiming for is that it caps you out at 40% less damage taken with Fortify. 100% agree. Damage over time multiplier. GGG wants to move a lot of the power away from cluster jewels. So they felt like Cluster Jewels gave way too much damage over time multiplier bonus, and other sources did not, relatively speaking. So they basically replaces all sources of the stat on non-notable Cluster Jewel passive skills with the standard damage increase to be consistent with medium Cluster Jewels with damage bonuses and lowered values. So basically, no more damage over time multiplier on non-unique Cluster Jewels and replaced with increased damage over time. That is actually a crazy nerf for a lot of existing damage over time builds that relied on 2 cluster jewel setups. I, for one, am familiar, of course, a lot of Toxic Rain build guys on my channel, and so that will be a bit of a rework and some adjustment that we're going to need to adjust to. So the next part here is damage over time multiplier for weapons. They want to put more importance on weapons, and so this is actually a buff for weapons. Using damage over time multiplier. Basically what they're doing is they're changing the damage over time multiplier modifier to be a suffix rather than a prefix without reducing its power. And so if you're familiar with one-handed weapons like scepters, a lot of the damage over time multiplier or spell damage power comes from the prefixes. So for example, in the screenshot here, the skill gems, +1 skill gems, as well as the spell damage are all prefixes. And so it was hard to fit in damage over time multiplier for a weapon like this, but now you can because it's a suffix. And so, you know, if you got a weapon like this, man, this is a crazy weapon. 100% spell damage, +2 skill gems, and fire damage over time multiplier. This would absolutely be an insane weapon. So overall, I think that is a buff for weapons. The next part is veiled mods. Basically here, they're saying the Aisling veiled mod was too powerful before. So it's no longer going to be considered a crafted mod. Basically what happened before was it was considered a crafted mod. What you could do was Aisling craft onto your item. You could actually use your advanced tooltips to tell whether it was a prefix or a suffix even before you unveiled it. And if you did not like that, you could actually remove the crafted mod and redo the Aisling and never, you know, risk your item at any point until you unveil the item. And so it was quite strong before, and they didn't like that, so they're removing that. But what that also means is that you can actually block certain mods now before you put your Aisling craft on, right? Because now you can actually craft a prefix or suffix and then throw on the Aisling craft because it's no longer a crafted mod. And so, you know, in that sense, it's okay, but it's definitely a nerf, in my opinion, to not be able to remove the Eisencraft, you basically have one shot at it now. The other thing about veiled mods is the veiled chaos orbs can no longer give you a second veiled modifier on the item, which before it was possible if you did it the right way. So this was a nerf to veiled chaos orbs, which I think is very appropriate. Veiled mods are very strong. I don't think you should be able to have multiple veiled mods on an item. And so I like that change personally. And then finally, veiled mods, if you're familiar, some of the veiled mods are dual attribute modifiers, which used to be able to stack with regular modifiers on an item, which gave you an insane amount of flat attributes. So this is no longer the case now. You cannot have that stack with other flat attribute modifiers. And then the final two sections go through some other changes that are going to be available in the patch notes as well. This is just a subset of some of the stuff that will show up in the patch notes tomorrow. I won't go over them, really, I don't think. These are very specific things that they're talking about. They're not sort of the more general topics. So you can read through this yourself if you'd like. There's some very specific ones that they talk about. And then down here, they're talking about buffs to underperforming skills. Another thing I probably won't talk about. But, you know, it's good to see some of the skill names here that are being buffed. You know, check this out yourself. This will be, again, in the patch notes as well tomorrow, which I will be doing a deep dive on as well. So make sure you stay tuned for that. All right, guys. So there you have it. That is the Balanced Manifesto. Now, the patch notes are coming out literally tomorrow. So we are going to see the details of how they're going to implement a lot of these discussion points that they've made in the Balanced Manifesto itself. It will be, without a doubt, a lot of nerfs. And I personally, and this might be an unpopular opinion, I think I might be one of the only ones out there, but I absolutely love the changes that they're making. I'm very excited to see the game slow down. I'm very excited at the game to feel challenging again at some point. I think it will be a shock. Okay, so for everybody jumping into 3.15, having experienced maybe 3.13 or 3.14 even, I think it will be a shock. And there will be an adjustment period. You know, there will be sort of that initial shock. But I think once we all get through that and we get accustomed to the new speed and the new metas, you know, I think it's really a great direction that the game is going. I'm really excited to see that. And I love the changes that GG are making for the game. But of course, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions as well. Do you like the changes or not? Or which ones do you like and which ones do you not like? Please leave a comment in the comment section below. I would love to hear about your thoughts and have a discussion on that. But otherwise, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you did, please like and subscribe. I also stream on Twitch Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. Times are in the description below. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.